Hi, I'm Paul Gilbert. Today we're talking about my book, Lead Like a General, Modern Research on Leadership as Seen Through the Civil War. I have another chapter on Mosby. One just wasn't enough, and this one focuses on his role as an innovator. And I look at this is late in the war. You saw sort of a baby-faced Mosby at the beginning. He looks about 10 years older and has a beard. But I looked at a book that is really kind of revolutionized thinking about innovation called Blue Ocean Strategy. And it is really to create a market space that is so different from what everyone else is doing that the competition is almost irrelevant. And what the areas that Mosby was able to innovate in was the Partisan Ranger Act, which basically allowed kind of the rules of privateering. If they captured anything that was not of military value, then they kept it and divided it among themselves. So after an action, they turned the horses and the guns, but if they got anything else, money, supplies, they divvied it up. So they were kind of self-paid to a high degree. They had no base of operations because they were operating very nearby this enormous Union presence. And the Union would always go in to the countryside and try to find out where they're at. Well, he'd call everyone together at a rendezvous point. They'd change that up. And no one knew what their job was until they got there. They'd go do whatever they were going to do, and then afterwards they'd split up and they'd all go and sleep in barns and houses and change out their uniforms, and they would just be at ready until the next call came. So they could never round up more than a couple of them. And weapons and training, well, most of the armies on both sides were spending a lot of time marching and turning and doing things like that. There's a quote in the book from one of Mosby's Rangers that they couldn't have gotten in a straight line if they had to. They just didn't spend any time working at that. But they understood the power of the revolver, which was a very new technology. It had just been invented about 10 years before the war. And they all carried multiple pistols. And they had great firepower. They got the fastest horses. And they sort of perfected their style of fighting, which was different from everyone else's. So they were playing just an entirely different game than their opponents, which made it very frustrating. Actually, some of the Union soldiers that went up against them said that they didn't fight there. And they weren't. They were doing it their way. In the Blue Ocean Strategy, you're trying to get a value innovation by reducing the cost of operations and at the same time increasing the value. And the only way you do that is to come up with a new paradigm, a new model of how you're going to operate. So he didn't need supplies. He was stealing all of his armaments off the Union and living off the land.